Hey everyone, and welcome to the talk. So I'm going to talk about how serverless and DevOps fit together and what you can do as developers and DevOps people to succeed using serverless. So let's just start. So a little bit about me. I'm a software engineer in my background. I've been in software for over 15 years. A lot of my experience was in cybersecurity in the Israeli intelligence unit, as well as some other companies. And in the last 3 years, I'm one of the two founders and the CEO of Epsagon. I'm based in New York City. And a little fun fact about me, I love traveling. I've been to more than 40 countries, and this is a photo of me in Japan in the winter. So let's begin. And again, feel free to drop questions, and I'll be happy to answer anything. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, an overview of serverless technologies and what they look like. So I'm sure many of you heard about serverless, but maybe you're not necessarily sure exactly what it means. So hopefully I can help and cover that today. And why it's such a good fit with DevOps. I mean, as DevOps people, why you should care about serverless and why it can be helpful for your job. And then we're going to go into the more practical piece, which is how can you integrate serverless technologies to your applications and how to build new applications using serverless technologies. And finally, we're going to talk about the tools that can help you in this journey to make you more successful. So what is serverless? Basically, serverless talks about how you can utilize technologies to run software without managing hosts or servers. So by utilizing third-party APIs, cloud-hosted services, and things like AWS Lambda, for example, you can basically be at a point where you are running high-scale production applications without thinking about the service as the servers. It's there, but you don't really care about it. That's really the point of serverless. So people think about serverless as something that is for developers because it helps you develop things quickly without worrying about servers, right? But for the operations people or the DevOps people, sometimes they think about serverless as maybe something that is a bit suspicious. I mean, where are those servers? What's going on there? For example, security-wise, I don't know what's going on my servers. For fixing problems, you can't connect to a server. You're very used to doing that. So suddenly you can't do that. So obviously, this is a big change. But as we are seeing, as Epsagon, for example, in the last 3 years, the silos between development and operations are slowly breaking down, which means that it doesn't really make sense to think about serverless as something that is just for developers. It's really a company priority to go to production faster, to increase developer velocity, and serverless can really help companies do that. So instead of worrying about it, let's understand how it can help the business and how to be successful in serverless. So what's really going on in the world in the last decade, I guess? From monolithic applications running on traditional servers, applications are becoming to be broken down. And suddenly, instead of one service, you have 5 services and 10 services, and then quickly growing this number to hundreds and even thousands of services. And especially in the cloud, where it can give you so much to do so easily with so many technologies and APIs, applications are suddenly becoming extremely distributed. And we're seeing even internally in Epsagon as a company, we have thousands of microservices. We are actually using serverless heavily. We utilize Lambda functions and many other services. And we have already thousands of serverless functions. So that means that this is not just a theory. This is really the practical reality that we are in. And think about an enterprise, how many services would they have? So the complexity grew exponentially. And at the same time, the host is becoming less and less relevant. So it's even abstracted completely. So what does that mean for developers and for DevOps people? This is this is how it looks like. Just a simple example, even though it looks a bit complex, this is actually a very simple example and very common, where you can see a bunch of different services communicating with one another using different technologies, different ways to transmit messages. And this is already, running in production in tens of thousands of cases today. And this is so common. And how do you deal with this kind of complexity where you want to understand what's going on and be able to fix problems quickly and develop as quickly as you need to? And so let's go and talk about, the benefit of serverless, first of all. Why is it such a great fit for DevOps people? So really putting it very simply out there, it really reduces the amount of work needed to deal with infrastructure management tasks. You don't have to worry about server, cluster provisioning, patching the server, security, operating system. All that stuff is taken care of for you by the cloud provider. So that's already pretty clear benefit. I mean, you literally don't have to worry about a certain amount of things that you used to worry about. And maybe, you can compare it to how you used to manage data centers in the past. So instead of that, you're using the cloud. You don't have to worry about data centers. So in the same way, you don't have to worry about managing the servers anymore. So obviously, this is a very straight benefit that if done right, it can significantly increase the efficiency of the DevOps teams. Now let's talk about cost. So everyone talks about the cloud cost and how can I monitor it, how can I reduce it. So first of all, serverless it's not necessarily the cheapest thing in terms of dollar-based value, but the pricing model is very unique and it's very kind of makes sense because it's pay per use. So that means you don't pay for what you don't use. So whatever this price is, you've been using it. So now the question is not about, am I overspending, but it's about, am I using this resource in the most efficient way? So that's a very different type of discussion because today, if you go to a large enterprise, typically you'll see many hosts, tens of thousands of hosts that are costing millions of dollars, but maybe 30% of them are utilized or 50% are utilized. With serverless, this could never happen because you're paying for what you're using. So the question becomes less about, why am I paying for this, but more about why am I doing things this way? Is there a better way to architect my system? Is there a better way to use other services instead of serverless to where they fit? So it's much more of an intelligent engineering level discussion rather than, managing hosts, where are they, who is paying for them, which is obviously as a company, that's where you want to be. And probably the most important benefit of using serverless is the increased time to market, and some people like to call it the developer velocity. So since you're saving so much time on managing infrastructure, this is not just about managing the server itself, but it's about managing the full service and application from end to end. You can literally click a button and your code is going to be running in the cloud in a second with almost infinite scalability. So that's something that is pretty unique and you can't really compare it to any other option today. So that means that as a company, if you have the right design and architecture, which is what we believe we do internally at Epsagon since day one, we're using serverless very heavily, we can really just go and ship a new feature to production with so minimal effort because it's all about writing some configuration file, shipping it to a serverless function, and maybe some other services attached to it. So as a company, if you adopt this mindset, you can really start working in an increased velocity. And that's something that is probably the reason, people are going to the cloud to begin with. It's all about time to market. So if you think the cloud is good for your time to market, then serverless is good in the same way if you do it the right way. So these are extremely important, things to consider if you're thinking about going into serverless. So how do you start? So first of all, of course, you need to understand what serverless is, what are the best practices. I mean, what kind of application are you building? Should you use Lambda? Should you use API Gateway? Should you go to Azure? There are many options out there. So obviously, this is probably true to many types of technologies you want to go into. And then the important piece, in my opinion, is before writing the code, think about the architecture and the design of our application. It's even more important in serverless because you have more components. So every component on its own is less significant, but the connection between them is more significant. So you really have to understand how different services behave, what triggers what. And if you have a strong serverless design or serverless pipeline, you can really make it distributed in the right way. So you can change every component individually and not worry about cost exploding or timeouts and all that stuff. And finally, you do need some tools around it. I mean, the cloud provider will offer you the basic tools, which are great to start with. But at some point, and we believe the point is relatively soon in the process, you do need some tools to get much better understanding of what's going on, both in development, production, testing, security. All those things are, I mean, it's not necessarily specific to serverless. Some of them is more relevant to microservices in general. But if you do have the right tooling, you can really squeeze the most out of those benefits, especially of developer velocity, because then you can really focus only on your business logic. And again, if you want to integrate serverless into your existing applications, which is very common, I would recommend not go one by one and start rewriting things, but rather think about what's already working and you don't really have to worry about. Maybe you should leave it as is right now and start writing new microservices and connecting them. Because eventually, if you're going seriously on a microservices design pattern, you don't really have to worry about each individual service as much as you need to worry about the entire application. And finally, the serverless is not just Lambda function or function as a service, it's a whole suite of tools. And services, you really need to understand them and connect them together to basically use what is already out there to build the application much more fast and without worrying about basically almost anything besides your own code. Now let's talk about the challenges of serverless. So it gives some great benefits, but it also leads to more complex environments, which are typically highly distributed. And in those environments, it's difficult to find problems, to troubleshoot issues in production especially. So what can you do to reduce the risk and to be able to keep the developer velocity high as you want it to be? So first of all, you would like to troubleshoot and identify problems, especially in production, customer-facing problems, as downtime, latency, errors, and so on. You really want to make sure you can pinpoint them and fix them quickly. And another thing that we're seeing is that the application layer is becoming more complex, but the existing tools were traditionally focused more on the infrastructure layer. So suddenly you have multiple tools used to kind of monitor everything, but they are not really correlated together. So the less tools you have usually, the better off you are. And finally, you have different insights of different parts. So the more insights you have and the more sophisticated they are, you can understand where the problem is. So again, in the past, it might have been a problem with the CPU or the memory of the server. Today, the problems are typically much more difficult and you have so many components that are involved. So what we at Epsagon focus on is the observability for microservices environment in general and specifically for serverless environment as well. So we really think that the right thing to do is to combine the metrics, the traces, and the logs into really a single experience rather than separated data pieces, because you need metrics to know what's going on. You need the data in the log to see what happened there and why. But the traces is really the missing piece that connects it all together, and today it's still missing. And if you want to get good traces today, you really have to implement it yourself, and it's not connected to anything. So Epsagon kind of tries to address this problem with a correlated solution that is very automated and easy to use. And the good thing is that, a Lambda function, for example, or even a service like AWS Fargate, which some people consider serverless, don't have any hosts. So it's a great benefit, but it also makes it difficult when it comes to understanding what's going on, because you can't install an agent on the host, for example. So what we do is instead use an agent SDK, which is essentially a code library that can be injected anywhere, including Lambda, Kubernetes, and so on, and it's fully automated. So once you have that, you see the full picture really in a matter of a few moments, just a few clicks, and you get the full picture. And it's basically similar to what I've shown in the previous slide. You can see those end-to-end traces and really understand what's going on in production right now. So you don't have to guess anymore, especially as the architecture changes and evolving so rapidly. So we have some time for Q&A. So, I mean, I would love to hear about your concerns or experience working in serverless, and I'm happy to share from our experience at Epsagon and from our customers what are some of the best practices and challenges that can happen in the journey. If there are no further questions, feel free to reach out to me via chat or email. Oh yeah, there is a question. So the question is, could you give us some more details on your strategy when monitoring production environments? Yeah, definitely. So usually what we believe is very important is to make sure that there is not huge amount of implementation and maintenance cost. So if you pick a solution or a suite of solutions that require you to consistently go into the code and add information there, it's really going to slow down your developer velocity. So we really believe in automation. So this is what the first part. How can you make it very automated? So as I mentioned, everything we do is based on automated code instrumentation. So basically you just inject the library inside once and that's it. You don't have to worry about it. All the distributed tracing happens out of the box. The second aspect is to have unified monitoring. So instead of having, for example, dashboards and metrics, logs, tracing tools, no, we believe you need to have one tool that will really capture everything. So Epsagon, for example, we use Epsagon internally. So you can get the metrics you need. You can get the alerts into whatever system you have, like PagerDuty, Slack, and so on. And then every time something bad happens, you can see the end-to-end transaction inside of Epsagon, and we show you the logs that are related to it and all the payloads and the traces on top of it. So the experience is very straightforward. Instead of investigating using multiple tools, you go to Epsagon and usually in a matter of 5 minutes, you solve the problem. So automating, having one source of truth as much as possible. The second question was, if we add tracing to the set, then does that become observability? So that's really a matter of what's the current trend. I mean, just like observability became kind of a overused word, I think, again, it's not necessarily something that is well defined, but instead of what we basically say is, yes, there is metrics, logs, and traces, but instead of thinking about them as three separate components, we say that distributed systems, which is what we're talking about today, by definition, you need a distributed tracing solution in there. Otherwise, you will always get a very shallow picture of what's really going on. So you need distributed tracing and you need it automated. Otherwise, again, it's going to impact developer velocity. And then the metrics and the logs, I mean, metrics are pretty commoditized today, so you can get them from different places. We allow you to get them directly from Epsagon or from a different tool. And logs are already out there, so we don't need to, again, to reinvent the wheel. You can just integrate with any log provider that you have out there. So the distributed traces are the core, and they should be unsampled. This is what we focus on. Unsampled traces and all the payloads on top of the trace. So you just go and you have some kind of a snapshot of whatever happened in your production, let's say 2 days ago. And if you need the log, you can click and you can get the right log from your Elastic or from CloudWalk or whatever, and we will put it in the right place in the trace. So it's not like a separate experience. It's really a coherent, correlated experience. So that's why we really don't see there is a strong alternative to Epsagon when it comes to a really unified solution. Like, you always have to use different tools, and that's causing a lot of the problem from what we're seeing. Any more questions? So I'm going to put my email and Twitter in the chat just in case you want to get in touch with me. And thank you, everyone. There is another question. How much is Epsagon? I guess that's the question. I mean, I can share quickly just so if anyone wants. There is a self-serve tier that you can easily get started with and sign up for a free trial. And from there, you can choose whatever plan works best for you, or just get in touch with our team and we can help you figure it out. Okay, thank you, everyone.